Welcome to The Undefined Leader, where we reimagine leadership, redefine work, and get curious. This is part 2. Part 1 was about history of leadership. So Derek, you walked us through kind of 1840s to modern leadership styles, how the world, the economy, how our understanding of leadership has changed throughout the time. So if you missed that, go back to the last episode. Today, we're going to just think about what we talked about last and try to figure out what our own leadership styles are. And hopefully we can help our audience today figure out what their leadership styles are too.
Sounds great.
Derek, to get us started, will you give us just a quick little summary of the history of leadership?
Absolutely. And yeah, I want to encourage people to, if they want a lot more detail and the timeline, to check out that previous episode on the history of leadership and theory. But essentially, to boil it down, we went from viewing leadership as something of just who you were. It was born in you. It's who you are. That didn't work. That theory didn't hold up to it's what you do. It's your behaviors. Didn't quite hold up as well as a theory. And then it started to get into, no, what you do matters, but it's what you do and how it has an effect on other people. Things like path goal, right? Of how you're moving people towards that goal. And now as we get into the modern era too, it's even more about the type of effect. It's not just you have an effect like fear or things like that. It's the type of effect that you have on people that's really important as a leader and in the study of leadership. Alex, I'm curious. So I did a lot of talking last time and kind of just went into like professor mode. Now that we've had a little time to kind of like think about it and everything, what were just thoughts about just kind of going through the history of everything, or any aha moments about kind of like the journey of where we're at to get to modern leadership styles?
I think the thing that shocked me the most is that the study of this started in 1840. That's wild to me, but it also makes sense. The more I thought about it, it makes sense. I'm assuming that's around the time where the study of psychology started as well. And so that kind of goes hand in hand. The thing that I was questioning a lot is we say that it started from your trait to behavior to effect. But is that actually true? So have you heard of the halo experiment, halo effect?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So they had a group of kindergartners and they brought in a substitute teacher. And at the end of the class, they asked the kindergartners, which are the two substitute teachers better? Which one was better at their job? Who was a better teacher? And they realized that the kids kept saying teacher A. And when they looked at why that was, it was because teacher A was more attractive and more charismatic. So to this day, even though we say in theory that it's not your trait and stuff, is that actually true? And do we still have a bias of leadership for people that are more attractive, people that are more charismatic? Do we just assume that they are also good leaders?
That's very interesting. I think I have heard about that. And I know there's been some other things that kind of replicate that. And even too, like if you break down like world leaders and Fortune 500 executives, there are some traits. I remember seeing something about like the majority of the Fortune 100 CEOs are over 6 feet tall. And that's above the average height in the US. So that, there's something there. I think my thought though on something like that would be, it's one thing to measure like someone's perception of effectiveness, and it's another thing to actually measure effectiveness. So to me, the second half of that equation would be giving the kindergartners some type of, putting them into teams or something like that, giving them some type of task, and actually see which teacher got them to do the task and how they felt about it afterwards. Because the perception of, hey, we like teacher A more might not actually mean anything though about the leadership ability. It's just the favorability of things. And I think that's what we saw in the era of traits. And before that is, hey, it's king, whatever, the great. They're a super nice person. That means they're a great leader, but the actual effectiveness of that rule nothing might have really happened in it. So that's kind of like my thoughts about it.
Do you think we actually agree on the definition of leadership? Not just you and I, but just as a society, when we keep saying this is a good leader? On our last episode, we kept talking about how are they actually measuring a good leader? Why are they actually saying that this is a good leader? So, what do you think is the most common definition for leadership today?
Well, like there's obviously so much context there, like a business setting versus a team setting or a sports setting, or, or things like that. Because leadership shows up in so many different things. For me, if you just kind of want like my answer on this, like leadership is the measurement of influence. And that's kind of what I was talking about, also the effect. And so it's not just about the person leading, you also have to look at the followers and the effect the influence the followers have on the leader and the influence the leaders have on the follower. And that to me is the idea of leadership. And I think that's where it separates from just being a leader, which obviously there were leaders before 1840. It's this idea of leadership, which has been studied after 1840, but there's always been leaders. And that's where it differs from like management and productivity and all that. It's the idea of the amount of influence, and if that's a good influence or a bad influence, like what is the effect? What are you thinking?
I have a very similar definition. It's the influence, but when the word you're using is effect and the word I've been using is impact.
Mm.
So the influence, but then what is the impact that you're also making on your team, the people, how they're showing up in the world, the impact of whatever the team sport or company that you're leading. Yeah. So I think we're pretty similar there.
Yeah, I think so. And so if we think about like leadership styles, why does that matter? And now this is where we're getting into that effect or that impact, because you might have all the traits, you might have all the education, you might walk like a leader, talk like a leader, I kind of understand it on all that, but just be, lack some type of self-awareness, or lack emotional intelligence, or lack ethics. Those are the main three things of modern leadership style, and not be as effective or impactful as you were expecting to be or hoping to be. And you're like, what? But I did A, B, C, D, E. And your followers are like, yeah, you did, but we're not on board. We just don't
Right.
like, we don't like your style. We don't like how you did it. We don't like how you make me feel on things. And I think that's why leadership is so complex. That was a running theme when I was going through the history of things, and we were talking about like transformational and servant, like these very good things. And my response was, yeah, but it's really hard. So most people end up just being transactional, because being anything other than transactional is really hard.
Well, leadership is people as well, and people are complex creatures, and how we're motivated and how we're influenced, we're just complex. So it makes sense. But we found a few questions that might be able to help one, you and I, and our audience of figuring out what type of leader you are, and trying to find how you might actually show up for your team and influence them. So the first question being, what do you value more, goals or relationships? Derek, what do you value more?
In a lot of ways, I'm a horrible person to ask questions to like this, because my answer is like, well, Alex, it depends.
Depends on the situation.
It depends on what we're talking about. But again, that is like the complexity here. But if I'm tapping into like my most, because I think part of these questions are like your authentic leadership style, like what is your authentic style? And so if I'm going to be in my most authentic mode, I tend to lean a little bit more on the goals versus the relationship. I don't know if that surprises you in my answer or
It
not, or if
does
you,
surprise me. Can you give me an example that really surprises me?
why does it surprise you?
Um, because we've talked about goals before, and I know how you're motivated around goals is wildly different than just common goals. And you're also a person that doesn't like to be told, even if it's yourself, of what to do and what the goal should be. Uh, so that's why.
Yeah, no, those are good. Those are good insights on things. I think for me too, we always have to define the terms. So when I'm hearing goal, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking outcomes, or I'm thinking, what is it that we're even trying to do? Like, why are we even making this product, or why are we even trying to sell this to a customer? So that's where my mind is at on things like that. And so for me, I'm just like a high info type of person, and I need to know all that info. And in my leadership style, I tend to like to have clarity around those things. Like anytime I've led teams or ran a business or anything else, like it's very important for me to know all the whys. So that's where my mind associated it with the goal and valuing type of goals. But you're right about everything that you said. And then once I know that, then I start to think about more of like maybe the relationship side of how we're going to work together to do it. What about for you?
For me, relationships. That probably didn't surprise
Does
you.
not surprise me.
But mainly because I think I could be working on any goal. It does not matter. It could be any industry, it could be any goal, it could be any project. If I'm doing it with the people around me that I believe in and trust in and like working with, we can get it done. Like we will get it done. And so I personally am more relationship driven. So I do lead a little bit more on the relationship driven side too. I agree with everything you said though. When I say relationships, it doesn't mean let's just have a group of friends that just like each other and show up and nothing gets done. Like that's not what I mean when I'm talking about leadership. Everything you said, I agree with, but I don't call them goals. I call it clarity. So having the right people around, but how do you define who the right person is for that project? That also depends on what are we actually trying to achieve. So that's more of like clarity, but I'm definitely more of a relationship
Mm-hmm.
focused leader.
That makes sense.
Okay. So part two, do I believe in structure or freedom of choice?
It's a
That's a
good
really
question.
hard question for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Well, it depends.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your first thought on that one?
It's really hard. It's a very difficult question to answer. I'm going to say structure because what I just talked about, clarity and vision and a path, that to me means structure. I don't mean structure as in SOPs and like processes, procedures, and you have to do everything to a T, like every single time, everything is the same. That's not what I mean by structure. Structure is you have the right people in place and you give the right people the right resources in order to be good at what they're doing as well. It's not just a free for all. What about you?
This one, for me, in my mind, the depends piece of it, it's like I kind of have different feelings if I'm leading or I'm following a little bit. I highly value autonomy and I highly value empowering people and giving autonomy. But in my mind, the best way that you give someone autonomy is different than freedom. So I know in the question it was structure or freedom of choice, but I'm kind of like making my own thing here a little bit. And the best way to have autonomy is to know what the rules are and to know what the guidelines are and to know what the structure is, and then have the ability to operate within that with autonomy and essentially freedom. Freedom is just a free for all. I don't actually think most people want that at all. We kind of need to know where the edges are and what the rules are, and then I think have the ability to make our own decisions and things within inside the confines of those rules.
I agree. So, talking about all the different leadership styles from part one, so far, what type of leadership style do you think would prefer structure or autonomy more?
Well, if we tap into the original kind of three, right, of autocratic, democratic, or laissez-faire, there's two quick separations there, right? The autocratic is going to want all the structure, and the laissez-faire is going to want none of the structure of things. So there's kind of that middle type of thing of the democratic, which leads to some of the more collaborative, which ties into the first one. I think if you favor relationships, you're going to want to have a more democratic upstream, and then as we get downstream, one of the more collaborative leadership styles. And then I think too, with a little bit of that autonomy, we're kind of in that collaborative zone of leadership styles, which there's a few of the modern that kind of fit in the collaborative.
Okay, let's go down to question number three.
Yeah, with three,
Would I rather make decisions on my own or collectively?
we're right there. Yeah, with
Right
that one.
there. Yeah. Again, it depends. It depends on the question and the situation and the decision that you have to make as a leader. For me, I like collectively. I think the strongest way that I'm able to get buy-in from my team is making the decision together, being able to talk through the pros and cons. Everyone feels heard, understood, and now we have more buy-in towards the decision that needs to be made. But there are times where sometimes you got to make your own decision and move it forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna get like real nuanced on this one because I think this is where like a lot of leadership skill comes into play, and also where sometimes leaders can get shoehorned into a style because of their inability to do both. And
Mhm.
so I actually prefer to make decisions on my own, but I know it's more effective to make them collaboratively for things like buy-in and just the humble confidence thing too of you might not have all the info. Like there might be some other endpoint that's actually better and you're open to it. So I am very comfortable making decisions. I don't mind that. And so my blind side can be not being consistently collaborative. For some people fear decisions and cannot like, they please don't make me make a decision. Now the risk there and the downside is, well, your team is going to operate at a much slower pace. It just is. If we have to be collaborative, it's going to be slow, and which can be good and sometimes, but also can be a weakness for a team. Also, if everything has a whole, everyone's got to sign, type of process to it. So I think this is where a lot of skill comes in of recognizing when's the right moment to just make decisions and when's the moment to be collaborative. But I do in my authentic style and self, I would rather make decisions on my own.
I think the downfall of just making decisions on your own too is you see it in really big companies now where the CEO doesn't have the same lifestyle and the day to day and the same challenges that majority of the company goes through. Through time, you forget the day to day and what's happening, let's say, in the warehouse when you're in your office and you're never renting a car anymore and you're never doing admin work anymore because somebody else is hired to do all that stuff for you. I think a lot of the times you forget and don't see other things that are happening within your company. So if you were a little bit more collaborative in that setting, you might have a different perspective and be able to make a decision more effectively too.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right. Question number, what are we on? 4?
Four.
Yes. Do I focus on short term or long term goals? Really hard.
It's funny.
Why is it funny?
Because again, it's like both, right? Or it depends. Do you have an answer for this? I'm still thinking
It,
for myself on this one.
it depends, like seeing like the future. What are we working towards? And so that would be long-term goals. What are we working towards? But I know that it gets to me and the team a lot if we're only focused on the long term and not necessarily what we need to do today and being able to see how you're gradually improving on a day-to-day basis too. Also, when you focus on long term, the downfall of that is a lot of the times your long term plans don't actually shape up the way you thought it would
Mhm.
be. And so, what you think that's going to happen 90 days from now or 3 years from now, it's just may not most likely happen. And so, thinking of short term is more beneficial sometimes, but I do like a long term. I think that's how I just made my decision right now.
Long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's tough. Well, your insight into me from the first question too, that I don't typically like respond well to goals and I don't get motivated by them is very true. And that's why when I answered mine, I was more like about like what is the big picture, like thinking, like why are we doing this? And so this one is hard for me on shorter long-term goals because a lot of times for me, like setting goals is sort of like I just have to because the system requires it, but it's not something that affects my performance or I'm gonna always try to do the best that I can. And I don't need a goal there to make me do it. And so short term versus long term, I'm kind of like in the neither camp there. I want to know what we're working for, what the big picture is, why we're doing it, what we're doing it. And then like let's just go do it and kind of see what happens. And if it's
That is So interesting, Derek, because you just picked in your first question, your answer was goals. And
Mhm.
now you're saying it's neither. It's not short term or long term.
I'm complex. I'm
You're
complex.
complex.
First one, the first one was goals versus relationship, not goals have them or don't on there.
So, looking at the different leadership styles, do you have any thoughts on what type of styles might lean more towards short term versus long term goals?
Yeah, there's a style called like the pace setting leadership style. It's one of the six modern ones. And that is someone who comes in and is basically like, hey, like this is the standard. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do these things, and they lead by that. They lead by their goals. So that's why it's called the pace setting. They're basically going to determine the pace that we all work at. And so that comes to mind too for someone that loves goals, and potentially even like short-term ones, because it's harder to set a long-term pace. So if you're setting a kind of short-term, like we have to do this week, it's Monday. Our goal this week is whatever. Let's get at it. Let's get, on that. That to me is like a pace-setting leadership style.
That makes sense. Do you think strategic leadership style would that lean more towards long term? Because
Yeah,
I
I
could see
think
that
like
being long and short.
yeah, there's another modern one called the authoritative or visionary leadership style, and I think that one leans more towards the long term
Long
of,
term.
hey, here's what we're trying to accomplish in the big picture, and they lead by that. They lead by this big vision of who we can become as a company or who we can become as people, and that's different than the pace setting because that doesn't necessarily apply like the how we're going to get there. It's just like here's where we want to go. And just a little insight into myself, I tend to fall a bit into that leadership style as my authentic style.
We were also in part one talking about that leadership style of selling the dream. Like, we're going to go here. This is who we're going to be. Not, and that would again be that long term.
Yeah. The authoritative slash visionary, the leader sets a vision and the way they motivate is by being able to explain why. And that's just like tapping into my like authentic side a lot as a leadership style is being able to lead by your ability to explain why.
Mm-hmm. Me too. So much so, I once worked for a company for 6 months without getting paid. No one got paid, but our leader was such a visionary, selling the dream that we all showed up every single day, giving it our all.
Yeah. Um,
That's the
and
con of that too.
yeah, I know there's I think like one more question to get to, but while we're here, this is, and it relates to this thing about the goal. Like, and again, why I have like this, people listening of like why I have this like weird relationship with goals of like, on one side, I'm okay with them, but on another side, I'm not. A lot of times in my experience, for someone who leads by goals, they don't tend to know why. Like, hey, like this is the goal. And I'm like, why? It's like, I don't know, but we're going to do it. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of like, oh, I struggle being led that way because the why to me is more important than the goal. But if someone is setting, like if someone has a leadership style where they're creating goals are good. I'm never going to try to at all debate and make an argument that goals are bad. They're objectively good. For me, the problem is when they lack a why behind it or they lack a strategy behind it, then I struggle. And that's when I get demotivated by it. Because if it's like, why? Well, then why not this number? Or why not this? Why not pull a number out of a hat? Any number, if that's like the logic system for how we're picking goals. And that's where I get caught up.
And that is why, going back to question number two of making decisions collectively or not, that is why I like collectively as well, because we all set the goal together as a team. You get
Mm.
to debate and talk and think through, and you're forced to think through the why behind it all. And then now it's not just the company's goal or my leader's goal, but it's also my goal because I was part of it, of making a decision.
I so agree with that. Yeah. And being able to see the logic sequence of how it came to be of that type of goal versus again, it just came from nowhere. We're not exactly sure, but it's the goal and we're going to do it.
All right, last question. And I love this question. What does a healthy team dynamic look like to me?
Why do you
Do
love
you
this
have,
question so much?
I think out of everything, this question probably tells you what type of leader you are the most or what you value the most.
Tell me more.
Well, you tell me your answer first, and then I'll tell you what you value and what I get out of it.
A healthy, a healthy team dynamic to me is a clear outcome. Everyone on the team agreeing with that, or believing with that, or wanting to be there for that. So like the clarity, and everyone knows why they're there, and a good leadership example of kind of modeling like the how I mentioned, like the autonomy, like the rules of engagement, and how we act and how we talk and how we communicate. And then just like clarity, but then the autonomy to all bring our own strengths and not have to like conform into one way of doing it, to be able to innovate. And I strongly like the transformational side of leadership too, where it's like we don't have to do it any one way. Let's create a new way to do it. So that to me is the healthy team dynamic.
That's why I love that question, because I feel like with that answer, you just summarized your answers for all the other questions we just talked about. My answer is going back to my first answer, which was relationships. For me, a healthy team dynamic looks like everyone is helping each other shine brightly. No one is dimming anyone's light. We actually shine brighter together, meaning we are helping each other become the best versions of ourselves. You're learning, you're growing, you're innovating every day. And that comes from having a very clear vision, a very clear why, the team working together and having that buy-in to be able to work towards that long-term vision, that you have a strong why to get up and go to work every day. And you see very specific impact that you're making on daily or weekly basis. You know you're making an impact on that vision, and the team is supporting each other. You're not alone, and it's not a top-down approach of the leader's job is to motivate everyone and that's it. But the leader's job is to create a very healthy team that we're able to support and motivate each other in order to get to the best version of ourselves and best version of our product that we're delivering or whatever the result is.
Yeah, everything that you said, like I see that in you from what I know about you too, and for you as a leader too of the team that you try to create and the atmosphere there. So I think that is like tapping into your authentic leadership style. And in the modern, in kind of like the modern theories, I think I told you this, Alex, like a while ago too, of like, Alex, like I think you're a good representation of the authentic leadership style, where it's really important for you to be able to show up as yourself too, as part of that also. And that healthy dynamic that you're describing, that everyone on the team feels safe to show up as themselves as well, right?
Mhm. Yes. Yet when I look at all the modern leadership styles, I do think philosophically, that is my type of leadership style. On the other side, the type of leadership that I use the most is probably the coaching.
I was thinking that too. There's, with what you were describing there too, the coaching style, and also like a bit of the affiliative style, which is a people first style. I think both of those are people first, but especially coaching, because it's all about making sure everyone around you develops. Like that's how you're going to win, is because we all just get more skilled and more developed and better and all that. And the affiliative is basically teamwork. People first, we're only as strong as our team, type of leadership style.
So personally, going through these questions, I was able to figure out what type of leadership style that I lean towards the most, all the pros that come with that. But also, I think what's so important about knowing what your leadership style is that self-awareness and knowing the cons that come with it too.
Mm-hmm.
No single person leader is perfect. No single leadership style is perfect. So knowing what your downfalls might be will help you become stronger in what you're doing too. So I know one of my downfalls of being that coaching style is that things go on a slower pace, because instead of just like getting the work done, creating that pace myself, I give too much leeway into, well, let me not give you the fish, but teach you how to fish. Even if it takes a really long time, I'm going to coach you until we eventually get there. So a lot of the time, the team may not be winning collectively as fast as it could be because of that.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you said that because, you and I are talking, we're sharing insights into our styles, and that's just us. Like, there's nothing right about that or correct about that. There are people who would answer all those questions differently than we did and have a completely different style, and that's okay. That is
Mhm.
also their style. That is their authentic style. No matter the style, there are strengths with it, and like you said, we can call them cons, or a language that I've kind of picked up that I like are just blind spots.
I like that.
That it has blind spots where you're so good, at one thing, or your mind is so focused that you kind of forget. So, with what you're saying there, like you have that strength of coaching the people around you, making them better, creating a strong team, the affiliative of the harmony of the teamwork working together. And so you're saying a blind spot is you might forget about the
It takes a
timeline,
long time
well, the,
to get
the,
there.
the
Yeah.
timeline. And so this is why diversity is such a good thing, because to have someone on the team that maybe has a little bit more of the pace setting style can lead projects that demand a higher speed, right? Or a faster rate, or things that, maybe are kind of sensitive or touchy. You might need a more autocratic person who's willing to, hey, you know what? I'll be the leader. I'll take it. I'll be responsible. I'll be accountable for this. I'll make some decisions, and that's okay. I'm comfortable doing that. And that's why it's not one size fits all. A diverse team has diverse leadership styles as well. And then as we get more skilled, we're able to take on more of the leadership styles ourselves. And so, Alex, like you might recognize, hey, for this one project, I need to switch my style.
Mhm.
And I think that's why these resources, and why even you and I want to share this info, is to help leaders get better at their leadership through understanding all sorts of different things, whether it's setting meaningful goals or communicating better, or just being more aware of the styles that exist.
Completely agree. Before we wrap up, though, I really want to know your leadership style. Just from the answers you were giving, I think you are a very strategic, visionary style lead. What do
Yeah,
you think?
I have a lot of affinity towards a bit more of a laissez-faire style. If we kind of go like all the way upstream a little bit, where and then just in my heart of hearts, I don't like managing. I don't like micromanaging at all. That is like by far the last thing that I ever want to be in a position of doing. And I can also kind of be a little bit of a lone wolf at times too, of kind of like to get into research and doing things. So that creates a lot of blind spots for me as a leader. So yeah, it's a little bit of laissez-faire. It's a little bit of transformational, and that I don't want to have to like reward, punish, necessarily do all of those things. I want to lead by example. I want to have a vision and a big idea, kind of give everyone the guidelines and the guideposts, and give a lot of empowerment and an autonomy. So transformational, visionary, and I would say kind of my middle tier is to be coaching a little bit. That's one that I've worked on, of getting better, is trying to be more of that, like my own era of leadership. My more modern style is just to be more of the coach style and mentor.
You're such a good coach and mentor, too. Well, this was a lot of fun. So hopefully everyone that was listening was able to follow along with the questions. If you did, give us a comment and let us know what type of leadership style do you think you lean towards the most, or let us know in the comments what your answers are and we can help you figure out what leadership style you lean towards the most. Derek, any last words before we go?
People just want more resources too. They're welcome to reach out as well. There's so many good books about this. There's TED Talks. There's a lot of stuff out there. So I'm hoping that being able to kind of condense things into a two-part of timeline, and then for you and I to have this conversation that people can listen in on, I'm hoping it was helpful for people.
Thanks for helping me find my leadership style, Derek.
Absolutely.